Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for tuning in to the weekly video message. This week, with announcements at the top, the important announcement is that Shabbat services for Friday evening tonight are at 5th and Morwood at 7 p.m. On the fourth Friday of every month, we're going to start holding services at 7 o'clock to provide a time where people who have young families who can't get to service on time, or for people who work until 5 and can't get out of the office in time to get home, change, and get to Shabbat services. For people who want to be at a later service once a month, we're going to hold services at 7 o'clock. Yay. For any other announcements, anything else you're wondering what the times are, please check below or check the website. Much more reliable than my memory. I recently read a meme that said if you ask someone, "Hey, do I look fat to you?" If you ask a boomer, they'll say, you could use some weight. You could lose a little weight." If you ask a millennial, they'll say, no, you look beautiful. All types are beautiful. If you ask a Gen Zer, they might say, we don't body shame. If you ask a Gen Xer, we might say, I only know five fat people, and you're four of them. Now, I tell this joke to show how different generations can communicate. And these are just generations that are on Earth right now. The way we communicate is very different between people. And I point that out to look at the story of the plagues that end this week in Parshat Bo. There is a joy that seems to come from the text out of the pain that is caused on behalf of the Israelites. We in our generations tend to point to the pain that is caused, and we say, hey, this isn't so cool. Let's take a drop of wine out of our cup for each of the plagues to minimize our joy in light of the suffering that other people went through because of our salvation. But the Torah reads a little bit differently than that. It says in Exodus chapter 12, verse 12, that the firstborns that die are both animal and human. And Rashi goes so far as to say anyone who was visiting Egypt, who's not from there, who was firstborn, also died. There's no reason for that. There's no reason for Rashi to need to point that out, except to say to those generations, God's power was far more important than any other feelings of characters that we're reading about in a book. They had the ability to separate themselves from the narrative, where we, I hope, are generations of much more empathy. So as we continue our studies and we continue to move forward together, I think it's important to understand the different ways that people are communicating. I tease my children all the time that words don't mean as much to them as they mean to me. And I think that as we move forward in our unification, it's important for us to acknowledge that not everyone means the same thing, and to really ask questions as we parse through what people are declaring while we come to the finality of this unification. I hope that the results are similar to the Israelites, that we find it much more a state of salvation than anything else. And I hope that we also find it much like our own modern times, where we acknowledge any suffering that others have had, and we acknowledge any losses that others have had, and we care for one another out of the goodness of our hearts to really bring forward peace. So thank you for watching, and don't forget to read below to really understand the announcements. But tonight, 7 o'clock, see you here. Shabbat Shalom.